Cheap Chinese electric cars are pouring into the European Union. Will the EU allow itself to become dependent on China? Let's hope not. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Chinese electric vehicles, EVs, are flooding into Europe. And considering how often Chinese EVs burst into flames, this might be an act of war. It's economic warfare, at least. You see, the EU, being the enlightened liberal thinkers they are, have set ambitious climate goals. By 2035, new fossil fuel cars will be banned. And so, Europe needs EVs, and China's got a lot of them. Ah, the clean air, breathe deep. In 2019, Chinese EVs made up only 0.5% of the European market. By 2027, that's expected to rise to 20%. Man, Chinese EVs are selling like hotcakes. Emphasis on hot. But it's not because of that made-in-China quality everyone craves. It's because they're cheap. About 20% cheaper than European EVs, according to the European Commission. Talk about a fire sale. Okay, I'm done. Now, part of the cheapness comes from the Chinese government subsidizing Chinese EV makers. Here's President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
Global markets are now flooded with cheaper Chinese electric cars. And their price is kept artificially low by huge state subsidies. This is distorting our market.
The other reason they're so cheap is slave labor. But it's slave labor for the environment. The EU is obviously freaked out by this because this pattern has happened before. The EU used to have a booming solar industry until cheaper Chinese solar panels decimated the market. Chinese solar panels, by the way, mostly come from stolen Western intellectual property and are also made with slave labor. But it's slave labor for the environment. The few remaining EU solar manufacturers are currently hurtling towards extinction, with thousands of jobs set to be lost. But if a similar fate befalls the European car industry, it won't be a few thousand jobs, it'll be millions. Because according to the European Commission, the automotive sector provides jobs to 13.8 million Europeans, representing 6.1% of total EU employment. Wow! If only the same European Commission didn't set incredibly ambitious emissions goals that led to a market full of cheap Chinese electric vehicles. Might have shot yourself in the foot with that one. But you shot yourself in the foot for the environment. Well, it seems like the EU might actually be fighting back this time.
And as we do not accept this distortion from the inside in our market, we do not accept this from the outside.
Last September, Xi announced an investigation into Chinese EVs and the possibility of tariffs. The results of that investigation will be presented in November at the latest. This is something the U.S. has already done. The U.S. has a 27.5% tariff on Chinese-made cars, which is why you don't see Chinese cars in America. So it's good to see the U.S. and its allies in Europe uniting for a common cause. Oh wait, Germany is getting in the way. Gosh, that sounds familiar. Yes, Germany is opposed to the tariffs. Why? Because China is a huge market for German cars. In 2020, 1 in 3 German cars were sold in China. And they are terrified that if the EU puts tariffs on Chinese EVs, the CCP will retaliate against them. And their concerns are legitimate. In 2020, Australia called for an inquiry into the origins of COVID-19. Beijing responded by essentially blocking the import of Australian barley, beef, and wine into the Chinese market. In 2022, when Lithuanian authorities allowed the Taiwanese to open a de facto embassy, Beijing responded by sanctioning Lithuanian officials and pressuring multinational companies to sever their business ties in the European nation. This row led to Lithuania exports to China declining to almost zero. This is why French government officials are warning that Berlin will try to undermine the electric vehicle probe launched by the EU in an attempt to protect its car manufacturers' interests in China. But here's the thing, even if Germany does manage to derail the EU investigation, German car companies in China are doomed. That's not my words, that's an industry insider speaking to Reuters, saying the situation is doomed. And that in China, foreign brands' days are numbered. Because this is a pattern. The The CCP lures Western companies in with the promise of the China market, steals their intellectual property, creates cheap Chinese knockoffs, and then drives the Western companies out. That's what happened to American Semiconductor Corporation. After the Chinese company Sinovel stole their IP and drove them out of the market, Wall Street analysts wrote it off as dead, and the company lost more than $1 billion in shareholder equity and 700 jobs. Don't worry, they were able to sue for $59 million. Justice. So Germany is willing to screw all of Europe for maybe a couple years more profit in China. Of course, this is coming from the same country that completely relied on Russia for its energy needs, even after the invasion of Crimea. I feel like maybe there's a lesson in here about not doing business with authoritarian regimes with presidents for life, unless it's for the environment. And now it's time for me to answer a question from a member of the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army, fans who support the show on patreon.com/China Uncensored. Today's question comes from Insider. Trump said if he's elected, he will target and execute the leaders of Mexican drug cartels. I wonder if he could please do that with the rogue Chinese drug companies and their associated cartel leaders as well. Great question. That was in response to my recent episode about how the Biden administration seemingly covered up the extent of China's involvement in America's opioid crisis. So yeah, like with everything going on with the EU, the problem always goes back to the Chinese Communist Party. Until countries around the world really unite together to solve that fundamental issue, nothing will ever really change. The Chinese Communist Party is an authoritarian regime bent on becoming the world's sole superpower. That means taking everyone else down. So yeah, Trump can send kill squads to Mexico to take out cartel leaders, but it's still China providing a lot of the drugs, handling most of the money laundering, even providing weapons. The CCP is the final boss. Thanks for your question and your support, Insider. And thank you for watching. Click that orange button to join Insider on Patreon, and click on this new video from my show Deep Thoughts While Gaming, where I talk about news, politics, and philosophy through the lens of gaming. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.